Hi, this is Christopher Bruza. Welcome back. Today we're doing a gel test of my home defense rounds and my carry rounds. We're going to get back to gel testing rifle rounds, but one of the most important things that might ever happen to you would be defending yourself, and this test is for me. You're just an observer. This isn't what you carry, but these are what I would potentially end up using. And I was curious as to how they perform, so I decided to film it. So we test two different AR15 rounds, which is in this 10.3 inch barrel with an AAC suppressor on it. We test double-aught buckshot, Federal Flight Control, 9mm out of a Glock 17M. I don't like to do pistols on this channel. I don't think I've ever done pistols on this channel. To be honest, I don't like pistols. I'm a bolt-action rifle and defensive shotgun guy. But pistols are convenient. So when I'm wearing more than just a t-shirt, I'm usually carrying this Glock 17M or possibly a 19. In a t-shirt, like this one, which I have for sale now. You can see a link below to order yours. I also have ones with the M40A5 on them, and some more designs coming that are more hunting specific. Regardless, in a t-shirt, I'm probably carrying a 1911, simply because it's single stack and I conceal it better. So we're shooting a commander-sized Dan Wesson 45 ACP. It's the Valor Bobtail, and the other 1911 I carry is a bit unorthodox. It's a commander-sized 10mm. It was built by the Ruger Custom Shop for the Gun Talk radio program, which I'm a fan of. Tom Gresham, I love his writing, his father's writing, his YouTube stuff. Anyway, I've always bought their commemorative 10mm guns. They always, every 5 years, 5 or 10 years, something like that, they come out with a 10mm. They had a Kimber, then they had a SIG P220, which is a great gun, 10mm single action only, and then this Ruger Custom Shop. When I got it, it would not fire through a magazine without malfunctioning. So I sent it to Valor Precision, former Marine gunsmith who worked in Quantico, working on rifles and handguns, and he fully rebuilt it from the ground up, replaced everything in it except for the frame, the slide, and the barrel, and it's a killer gun now. It performed amazing. So those are what we're testing, and so let's go to the range and see how the AR15 did with XM193 55 grain ammo. So that was interesting. Obviously, decent penetration according to FBI standards of, was it 12 to 16 inches. The block is 20 inches long, and I didn't use 2 blocks because for defensive rounds, it's not a rifle round you're hunting deer with, and you're looking for that 12 to 16 inch penetration, and did not expect anything to pass 20 inches of penetration. This did not. As you can see, it deviated down, and the reason I chose this as my preferred round for this short-barreled AR15 is the 55 grain projectile is designed to tumble and fragment, and it's known for not over penetrating. Okay, so the muzzle velocity was 2,249 feet per second, which is pretty low, even though it's a 10.3 inch barrel. Generally, ARs are going to be up, certainly a 20 inch is going to be up near that 3,000 feet per second range. 16 inch, I'd expect to see 2,800-ish, something in there. So 2249, even though I already had this data when I set it in, recorded and everything, it still surprised me. But the penetration was good, 17.3 inches of penetration. Now, the jacket kind of split open, and the lead continued on, and the jacket was, 3-4 inches behind that, which is fine. The retained weight was 53.6 grains. It's a 55 grain projectile, only lost 2.5% of its weight that I could not recover, and I went through this pretty well. So just small parts of it breaking off, but the bulk of the projectile penetrated most of that distance, and we'll get into sectional density later. I think that has a lot to do with it. Because one, it's a light projectile and the velocity was low, the muzzle energy was only 618 foot-pounds, which is kind of in handgun range. Clearly, you saw the block. It's not going to behave that way. But I would expect an AR to be much, much higher than that. So the other round I tested in the AR was the Hornady TAP 5.56 NATO 75 grain. TAP is Tactical Application Police. It's a hard to get round, but it's known for working exceptionally well in short barrels. Granted, I have this set up and zeroed for 55 grain, but I got my hands on a couple hundred rounds of this and wanted to test it to see if I wanted to change my home defense rifle to this ammo. So let's see how that performed on the gel. So I was filming at 240 frames per second, which is the quickest any of my cameras will do. Much higher resolution than the previous gel test I did. So I was happy with that, but Performance-wise, this seemed to have a considerably larger temporary wound cavity. So when you see the projectile go in, it all expands and there's a much larger bubble in the gel, which then collapses and opens up again. And I think it was rather impressive. So a lot of that is probably due to the muzzle velocity. So this tap 75 grain chronographed at 2,621 feet per second. 400 feet per second quicker out of this barrel than the much lighter 55 grain. And that's likely because they use a powder that has a much higher burn rate, or quicker burn rate, where the XM193 was designed years and years ago with 20-inch barrels in mind. This is a newer round, and they likely chose a more appropriate powder. And just so there's no confusion, this is the ammo we're talking about. There's another type available, which is chambered in 223, not 5.56 NATO, but this is what I tested. And it's a boat tail hollow point. Now, it did not act like a hollow point in a hunting bullet or a pistol bullet. It did not expand. The jacket actually tore in two pieces, and the hollow point was fully intact, not expanded at all. Fragments of the lead went everywhere, and of what I could recover, I only recovered 59.9 grains of the projectile, so it lost 20%. It's not, it's still in the gel. I just couldn't find it. It wasn't intact. It wasn't a piece big enough where I could see it and pick it out, but that doesn't mean it's not effective. So it penetrated 14.5 inches, roughly 3 inches shorter than the 55 grain, but you're seeing a much bigger temporary wound cavity, which is tissue, or represents tissue being pulled, stretched, torn, which promotes bleeding and things disconnecting. Like, how many times, or I don't know about you, but I have shot deer in the chest close to the heart, where when you field dress it, the heart's physically disconnected from the body. The bullet didn't touch the heart, but the compression and expansion of all the fluids, the liquids, the tissues in there disconnected that heart from, I don't know where the arteries are. Anyway, disconnected the heart. So the muzzle energy, given the higher bullet weight and higher muzzle velocity, is much closer to what you would expect an AR15 to produce. 1,144 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, and I think when you watch the slow-mo video, that is represented. Now, it slowed down quicker, which is good. There's less chance of over penetrating at that 14.5 inches, and I am going to be changing to this ammo for this rifle in my home defense application. So next, I tested the Federal Flight Control double-aught buck 9-pellet copper-plated buckshot. And I use this through my 18-inch Terran Tactical built Benelli M4. And the reason I didn't test my 13-inch is, which is what I use for home defense, I had just cleaned it, and I had been shooting this 18-inch, and I needed to clean it. They're effectively the same gun, possibly a slightly higher muzzle velocity, although we did a video comparing them. You can look back in the catalog and find there's very little difference between that 13-inch and 18-inch gun. And this is kind of what I would typically grab over the AR, but let's see how it did, and then we'll discuss that. So. Okay, so this was a bit of a surprise to me. I expected some pellets to potentially overpenetrate. I did not expect 8 of the 9 to overpenetrate. And one frame shows 3 or 4 of them exiting. And it's a pretty cool picture. Now, I hit a little high in the block, a little higher than I wanted to. So you see the top of the block expand, and the wound cavity, that temporary wound cavity, is fairly long and nowhere near as large in diameter as the AR15. But you also can see the wad penetrated the gel 4 inches. Now the flight control is such good ammo because it produces a nice tight shot pattern, so it makes a devastating wound because you have several pellets very close to each other dispensing a ton of energy. And the way it does that is with the shot cup. The pellets are in a shot cup with the powder behind it. They exit the barrel, and then slowly the pellets separate from the shot cup. Generally, shot cups kind of open up like a parachute almost. Like the ends open up, it slows down very quickly, and the pellets continue. The flight control, it's actually attached fully in the front and the rear, so it takes longer to expand from that wind resistance. I'm sure pellets were exiting the shot cup. This was done at 15 yards. I did not say that at the beginning. This is done at 15 yards, which is a fairly long defensive distance. So I believe the pellets were exiting, but that shot cup had enough velocity that it penetrated the gel. It likely isn't going to amount for any sort of damage, but the muzzle velocity was 2,339 feet per second. Given that you have 9 pellets of double-aught buck, that's 441 grains of projectile. Now that doesn't account for Grex and the shot wad and stuff like that. So the front of the target has got had a ton of tiny plastic sand-like material on the front of it, and generally it's called Grex, and it's in there to keep the buckshot, when it's going down the barrel and there's pressure behind it, accelerating it, and those pellets are pushing into each other, it's kind of there to buffer and keep the pellets from deforming. Because as they deform, they're no longer, the drag is no longer uniform, and that's why your shot can spread more with one load compared to another, and so on. The one pellet I did recover was interesting. There was a flat spot on it, and the other side had a bunch of texturing. It didn't really look like it was from the Grex. I don't know if the gel made that impression on it, but I have no conclusion, but it was interesting. So a ton of energy. I mean, 441 grains at 2,339 feet per second, 5,356 foot-pounds of energy. That is, I mean, that's like 5 AR rounds. That is great. Now, the penetration, 18.1 inches is where the one pellet I recovered stopped. So that's the minimum penetration. The other ones continued on. I don't think they had a ton of energy. Now, I don't know if I had another block there, how much it would have penetrated. Whether it's only a couple of inches, I doubt it would have gone, through 2 blocks. But I can't say that for sure. But considering one stopped at 18 inches and looking at other tests, it likely didn't have much energy left. But shotguns have the reputation they do for a reason. Given the penetration, I didn't expect all those to leave. I would probably prefer the AR over the shotgun. I'm interested in testing some other types of buckshot, like copper plated, like the flight control, will potentially penetrate farther. And I have always been intrigued by number 4 buckshot. I know a lot of people say it's too small. We're going to do some tests on that, but having seen that go all the way through, and I have 2 children who live their bedrooms are down the hall. I'm probably grabbing the AR over the shotgun, at least until I do some more testing. Obviously, long guns are better than short guns, but you're not going to conceal carry a long gun. So let's go to the Glock 17M and see how that did. So clearly not as effective as a long gun. This is a Glock 17M, a 5-inch barrel, 4.5-inch barrel, wherever the 17 is, that I carry a lot of the time. And it was loaded with Nosler ASP 115 grain ammo. Did not intend to test that. I intend to carry Spear Gold Dot 115 grain. I had the wrong magazine in this gun when I tested it. A friend gave me a box of this ammo that was surplus from their department or whatever. I actually pulled it out of my a different Glock for testing, and chronographed one round, shot a target next to the gel with another round just to see where it's hitting, so I knew where exactly to aim in the target. And they felt different. So I went back and I chronographed, and the first shot in the chamber was a gold dot, which chronographed a bit higher, but the recoil felt different. And then looking at the ground, I was trying to find the brass, and I'm like, wait a minute, here's a nickel-plated case, and here's two brass-colored cases. And I was shooting a pistol at a rifle range, not at the actual shooting line. Nobody else was there at the rifle range. There are people shooting pistols that you hear. So I'm like, what the hell is going on here? So I went back, chronographed, immediately connected the dots and said, crap. So we tested the Nosler ASP 115 grain. It chronographed 1,131 feet per second, which is respectable for a 9mm 115 grain. Generally, the gold dot's going to be a little closer to 1,200, right around that 1,200 mark. And that gives you 327 foot-pounds of energy. So clearly, the lowest that we have tested so far, half of the 55 grain AR, and nothing compared to, the shotgun had 5,000 foot-pounds more energy, but with the Glock 19 you have 17 or 18, 19, 20, depending on what mag you use. Anyway, so it's more of, you get a lot of shots, and 9mm is just a common round. It's easy to shoot. Personally, not a big fan, and I would say it performed the worst out of these gel tests. It only penetrated 11.1 inches, where the FBI says it should be 12 inches minimum. So, that's pretty close, and we're at 15 yards. Would it do the job? It would likely do the job, but not great. I'm clearly still going to carry this pistol, or I have a 19 that I like as well. I think I've actually shown it in my Benelli M2 Terran Tactical video, just to talk about the stippling on the grip and how it wears. So the bullet deformation was pretty good. It was more of, rather than a peeling back, it was more of just like I almost want to say melting, because that's what it looks like, but I don't think that's what it actually did. And I recovered that bullet you see 114.9 grains, which is just about all of it, if not all of it. So it lost technically 0.1%. Mediocre performance. It's going to do the job. So I don't know. People love 9mm. Let's see what the venerable good old boomer 45 ACP does. So, in my opinion, much better. That was out of this 4 1/4 inch. You can see it's nice and got a ton of pocket lint on it because I carry this a lot in the summer. I love this pistol. I've had it since 2011 and it has a ton of rounds through it. It's a great gun. And it was loaded with Spear Gold Dot 230 grains. And you can see the temporary wound cavity is bigger. When you look at the bullet, the petals peeled away beautifully, which is why I love the Gold Dot. I think the Gold Dot is a great pistol round. 230 grains produces muzzle energy of 334 foot-pounds, just above that 9mm, which was 327. But your muzzle velocities, okay, so the bullet weighs twice as much as a 9mm, but instead of an 1131 muzzle velocity, you've got 809 feet per second. And the old adage of the 45 is it's heavy and slow, and it penetrates. But with good bullet technology, you also get that expansion and energy dump in your target. So 809 feet per second is to be expected as a commander size gun. And it penetrated a very respectable 14.5 inches. I would say the performance was expected and impressive. It's great. I see no problem with it. I would prefer probably to have the 45 over the 9mm. Now it's carrying 8+1 shots versus in that setup 19+1. So you've got a lot less there. I can't attach a flashlight to it, which I'd much rather have. Like, lights are very important. So that's one bad thing about most 1911s. You can't put a flashlight on them. Trigger is amazing. The gun's more accurate. It's heavier. It's steel. It's heavier, and they need to be built well. I mean, I have a ton of Glocks. I've shot Glocks for years. I mean, Glocks work. They're cheap. They work. You can't necessarily buy a cheap 1911 and expect it to work, but this Dan Wesson does, and it's not a super expensive gun. I think it was around $2,000 when I bought it, and that was back on the 100-year anniversary of the 1911. So it's what I expected, and it's a very good performing round. I mean, there's not much else to say. The wild card here is 10mm. I've always had a fascination with 10mm auto. I used to carry for a while a Glock 29, which is 10mm. Hunting, quite often, I will have a Glock 20 with me, or more recently, a SIG P220, 5-inch version of the P220, chambered in 10mm. Generally, the 220 is a 45. I like the 10mm. My first ever handgun was a 40 Smith & Wesson, and the 10mm is just a better version of that. So let's go to the range and see what happens. Who knows? Let's see what happens. a more impressive performance. 10 millimeters is generally considered the most powerful semi-auto chambering that's commonly available. There's just better stuff out there. But it's the more powerful commonly available round. And generally will alternate between the 1911s. So again, commander size, the difference is this doesn't have a bobtail, and it started out as a Ruger, but it is now a full custom gun. I mean, everything was hand fit, rebuilt. Valor is great. Look them up on Instagram, message him on there. Prices are reasonable, and generally what he does is take off-the-shelf 1911s and rebuild and tune them into very precise and reliable handguns. I choose a lighter round out of the 10 millimeter than most do. The 10 mil is designed for 200 grain projectiles. It's very common to shoot 180 grain, but in my mind, you can really up the velocity with a slightly lighter bullet. So I hand load for the 10 millimeter. That's the only pistol caliber I hand load for, because off-the-shelf ammo is very anemic. It doesn't have the velocity of what it's capable of. You can buy Underwood ammo. It's hard to get. It's expensive. Double tap is good too. I choose to hand load for it, and I use the 155 grain Hornady XTP bullet, and this chronographed at 1,411 feet per second. So 155 grains at 1,411 feet per second gives you 685 foot-pounds of energy. That is more than the AR15 with the 55 grain bullet. Granted, it's a much heavier bullet, going 2/3 the speed. I don't put a lot of stock in energy, but they list it on bullet packages, and you see discussion, especially on hunting forums. Oh, you need to hunt elk, you need this level or this amount of energy. To shoot a grizzly, you need this. So I mention it. I personally, it doesn't mean much to me, but it's easily calculated. So here we are. Now, a bullet lighter than the 45 ACP, going much faster, expanded spectacularly. When you look at the amount of the bullet that expanded versus the tail of the bullet, it's quite dramatic comparing the three handgun bullets. And it penetrated almost as far as the 45 ACP, 14 inches even, where the 45 ACP was 14 and a half. And the way they actually settled in the gel, I took the leading edge, but when the bullets got further in the gel, they would tumble. They were very, very close, as to where the 45, you're looking at a pedal sticking out on the end of it. And I think the 10 millimeter was actually backwards. But I mean, effectively the same. But you can see the way that gel reacted. It dumped a lot more into that gel. the 10 millimeter is a great round. I alternate between the two guns generally in the summer. Inside the waistband, steel guns, you sweat. You got to clean them often, otherwise they rust. I have very acidic sweat that tends to rust stuff quicker. Actually, I don't know if you can see what I mean. Like, this hammer is all discolored and rusted on both guns, because I do carry them and use them. One thing I mentioned is this has a full-size guide rod to help mitigate recoil a little bit. It adds some weight to the front of the gun. Because the main complaint about 10 millimeter and why people tend to not carry it is, one, it requires a 45 size frame. Two, it has a lot of recoil, and it's snappy recoil. It's not like a 45 where it shoves you. It is snappy recoil. And I think it'd be a lot more popular if people spent more time with it, because of the three, I mean, that it's a clear winner for the pistols, but I hate pistols. I only shoot them because I have to. I wish I could just carry this or a shotgun. And one subject we haven't discussed here is sectional density. Now, the term is misleading. The way it's calculated for bullets, I don't necessarily agree with. It's basically the weight of the bullet in grains divided by the diameter squared. Diameter squared is not area. So it isn't like where sectional density in engineering is going to be your mass divided by the cross-sectional area. But with bullets, it's not the actual cross-sectional area, it's diameter squared. Now, when comparing bullet to bullet, that pi over 4 just gets thrown away. It's a constant. So comparing one to another, I see why they do it. But the term is wrong. But comparing one bullet to another, the numbers are going to be proportional. And the thought is a lower sectional density is not going to penetrate as far as a higher sectional density. Because bring it to extremes, if you have, say, 10 pounds of force, and you put that behind a ballpoint pen and push it at something, let's just say we're pushing it into ballistic gel. 10 pounds on that ballpoint pen is going to penetrate so far. Where if you take something with a lower sectional density, so say you still use that same 10 pounds and you put it behind a coffee cup. So you take a coffee cup and put that same 10-pound weight and push against that ballistic gel, the amount of force per area is much less. So that force is dispersed over a much larger area. So the thought is higher sectional density penetrates further than lower. And without actually going through the numbers, I mean, okay, we're going to take 12 gauge out of it because that's just a complete outlier, a ton of energy. Well, I mean, the higher sectional density AR bullet did not penetrate as far as the lower. And I think velocity has a lot more to do with it. And when you look at the pistols, they fall in line, but not as much as the numbers would kind of lead you to believe. So the chart shows sectional density. I don't subscribe to it, but I felt the need to mention it. So I wouldn't even really consider it. Look at muzzle velocity over anything, even more so than bullet weight, I think. Personally, I'm happy with the rounds I've chosen. Obviously, I'm changing this to the 75 grain tap. If I were forced to use the 55 grain XM193, it'll work. I'd much rather use that over like a 62 grain penetrator or something, because it won't penetrate as far. But I mean, long guns are better. My 9mm is back to it's back to 115 grain gold dots. What I did is I just took this magazine out, had a different one loaded with clearly the wrong ammo, put it in for the test. So I don't know. This was a test for me and my knowledge. Thank you if you lasted through this. Please subscribe, like, share, buy t-shirts, stickers if you want. I'll put a free shipping code down in the description, which saves you shipping, and basically means if you buy one shirt, I make nothing off it. If you buy two, I make a little bit. So until next time, enjoy.